Welcome back to another episode of Bucks Latest. Before we get into everything, a massive shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video once again. Huge shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the video. As always, I'm your host, Dean Simon, and before we get into everything, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe. We're still on that road to 2K subs, so if that's a journey you feel compelled to join, please consider pressing that big red subscribe button down below and turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on future Milwaukee Bucks updates. And the latest that we have is that you'll start to notice a trend here. After the horrible loss to the Denver Nuggets D team, the Milwaukee Bucks lost to the Minnesota Timberwolves C team, like, B minus team, I guess you could say, without Anthony Edwards and without Rudy Gobert in this one. Of course, the Bucks didn't have Miles Turner because he's still battling that illness that he left the Nuggets game with, but still no Anthony Edwards, no Rudy Gobert for the Timberwolves, and the Bucks just got absolutely demoralized. I mean, there's not really any other way you could put it. The Timberwolves just came out firing from 3-point range and they literally just didn't miss, and that was what opened up a 20-point lead with 10 and a half minutes left in the second quarter for this team. Jaden McDaniels didn't miss a shot in the first quarter. I think he went like 5 for 5 from 3-point range. Julius Randle was just on an absolute heater, and there was a reason why the Timberwolves ended up completely running away with this game. And it didn't just have to do with the fact that they were making everything, that just every shot that they seemed to shoot ended up finding the bottom of the basket. It was because of the Bucks defense too, or should I say lack thereof, because the effort that I saw tonight in terms of fighting over screens, I think my biggest issue with this game wholeheartedly was that the Bucks conceded switches, terrible switches, way too much. Like, it was absolutely ridiculous the amount of times, or I guess I should say the amount of game time that Julius Randle would get a screen and AJ Green switches on him. And now it's like, okay, we're just going to leave AJ alone at the free throw line guarding the Julius Randle back down. And then if he does make a move, we're going to come and double late and Julius Randle's just going to get a wide open layup. Julius Randle had so many opportunities against guys that are just smaller than him, posting up against KPJ, against Ryan Rollins, against AJ Green. And it didn't make sense, the ease with which the Bucks were just allowing these switches to take place. There was no urgency in terms of fighting over screens, sticking with the original guy to keep the better matchups intact. No, they just completely let everybody switch on everything in a game where, going into it, that kind of game plan just didn't make sense because the Timberwolves have so many guys that, just like from a size and skill perspective, just are complete matchup nightmares for the Bucks defenders, like Julius Randle and Naz Reid, even Jaden McDaniels. Those kinds of guys are too big, but also too quick for these Bucks defenders to handle, especially guys like AJ Green, even though, he does what he can at his stature and with his build. He does what he can. But even still, that kind of game plan of like, oh, we're just switching everything makes absolutely no sense. And then once the Timberwolves three-pointers started to go down, which I should mention, do we have the like quarter by quarter data? Okay, we do. Nice. 8 of 13 from 3 in the first quarter for the Timberwolves. Jaden McDaniels, 5 of 5 from the field, 4 of 4 from 3-point range. Julius Randle, 3 of 6 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3. He had 8 points and 4 assists. Jaden McDaniels, 14 points, 3 assists to end that first quarter. And just for the entirety of the game, I want to get these numbers right. The Timberwolves shot 59.8% from the field, 52.4% from 3 on 42 attempts. And they only hit 7 free throws, but it didn't even matter at all. Also, something that I wanted to point out is that, the rebounding, or again, I should say lack thereof, came in and impacted the Bucks and haunted the Bucks in several ways, but maybe none bigger than the work that, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Johan Berenje of the Timberwolves, I think he was the number 17 pick in the draft this year, their rookie center. He got to play with no Rudy Gobert and go against the likes of Giannis and would have been the likes of Miles Turner if he wasn't out too. But Berenje, in his, let's say, 29 minutes of play, 6 of 7 from the field, 13 points, 5 rebounds, 4 of which were offensive, 2 assists, a steal. And he was a plus 30 for the game. That isn't actually the game high, because Bones Highland also went absolutely nuclear for 23 points of his own on 9 of 16 from the field, and he hit 5 threes. Man, just an absolutely well-rounded game for the Timberwolves from a scoring perspective. Naz Reid also poured in an efficient 19. Julius Randle poured in 29. McDaniels finished with 17. Um, it was just an absolute team effort. Dante DiVincenzo, who usually terrorizes the Bucks, only finished with 11 points, but he had 7 assists and 4 rebounds. Just a wonderful game played for the Timberwolves, and that was started by their red hot 3-point shooting. But once they actually got going and they were red hot from three, and I guess we could just transition into the second segment because it is talking about defense. That lack of urgency getting out to the 3-point shooters, that just spread with regard to when Julius Randle would actually make a focused attempt at driving towards the rim or backing down, or it was Naz Reid backing down KPJ. There was no urgency to spring a double, to spring a trap of some sort and make these guys' lives harder on the backdowns. It was more or less just easy matchups, one-on-one with no help for Julius Randle and for Naz Reid. And, again, even for guys like Jaden McDaniels, who doesn't really he's a limited offensive bag. But yeah, it was just very embarrassing to watch. And I really don't want to say that this is strictly an effort based thing, or that I want to say the Bucks just aren't, putting in any effort and that's what's happening. But it seems like a lot of guys on this team think the problems with this team are going to fix themselves, and that if they just keep doing the same things that they're doing, that things are just going to become correct at some point. But that's not true. They have to put in more concerted effort with regard to gang rebounding, with their rotations and things like that that I mentioned in the past game, or after the past game against the Nuggets. They just didn't seem to want it as much. And in the beginning too, it was turnovers that kind of just got them into a funk. KPJ had some bad passes. Giannis finished this game with 7 turnovers, though he did finish with 25 points, 8 boards, 5 assists, and yes, 7 turnovers. He was a minus 11 for the game. Ryan Rollins continues his stinker. 5 of 14 from the field in this one. Though, what I will say, in the past video, I wanted to see a more concerted effort from Ryan Rollins going downhill. And I feel like that's what he gave me for the most part. I feel like he was looking a little bit more fearless, I guess you could say, with regard to driving towards the basket, but it didn't really result in anything great. KPJ, 13 points, 8 assists, 4 rebounds, 3 steals, and a block with 4 turnovers. And I guess that's just the number of turnovers you can expect for KPJ on any given night. But his defense in the passing lanes, maybe a little bit less one-on-one, but in the passing lanes, KPJ is always solid. And tonight was another example of that. He was picking off passes left and right, active hands. He just looked pretty awesome. Kyle Kuzma in this one played 20 minutes and 45 seconds, had 2 points, 2 assists, shot and made his only field goal attempt. And he was a minus 37 for the game. And I don't want to say that the minus 37 is just because Kyle Kuzma was doing bad stuff the entire time he was in, but it was really because he was coming in when Giannis was coming out. And of course, that's a recipe for disaster when you're coming in basically to sub out Giannis. And then once the Timberwolves start their run with Giannis out of the game, then that all kind of gets placed on Kuzma, at least in the plus minus department. So that was just kind of unlucky for him. But man, this bench unit didn't show up. Half the starters didn't show up. AJ Green, 3 of 9 from three, but the effort was still there. Somewhat. He had actually, of guys that played real minutes, he had the best plus minus on the team at a -8. So I guess that goes for something. But where do we go from here with this defensive effort? I mean, again, I don't want to come out here and say that the Bucks aren't trying, because obviously that's not true. The Bucks are trying. The Bucks are trying to win basketball games, trying to stop the opposing team from scoring. But it seems like they're just missing that extra little boost, kind of. I don't really know how to describe it. That they just don't have this kind of like stick to itiveness that other teams that have played them recently have, like how the Timberwolves, without Anthony Edwards and without Rudy Gobert, it seemed like they just came together as a gang, as a unit, and said, we're going to play 3 times as hard because we're missing these guys, and we all understand this, and this is what we're going into the game thinking. The Bucks just don't seem to have that kind of mindset, especially when you could think that they'd have the same motivations with no Miles Turner battling the illness. You would think maybe they'd go into it saying, okay, well, we don't have Miles Turner. Bobby's gonna, start at the 4, maybe Giannis at the 5. And so that means we're really gonna have to, help out with the rebounding, even though that's not Miles Turner's thing. But in terms of defending the rim, multiple guys have to be there, and we have to be ready to, run and scramble and spray out to the 3-point line. And someone's always got to be rotating for another guy. And that's just how it should work as a, teamwork based defense. And it feels like more often than not in recent games, and in especially this game, there's just no extra effort to come over and double a Julius Randle when he's one on one in the post against AJ Green until it's way too late. Or, the inability to get a hand up on Naz Reid when he's just standing at the top of the key on the 3 point line and he's going to obviously let that thing go. There's just no urgency. So, what do we do from here? Where do we go from here? I really don't know because it, again, it comes down to an effort thing. I feel like truly in my heart of hearts that the Bucks have at least somewhat the personnel to put up pretty big defensive stands. With how underrated I feel like KPJ is as a defender, obviously we know Ryan Rollins' talent. AJ Green can at least stay in front of bigger guys somewhat, because he has a very strong base, very strong guy. And we know what Giannis does. We know what Miles Turner does. This team has the makeup of at least a solid defensive team, at least like a mid-tier defensive team at the very least. But for whatever reason, they just lack that extra urgency. And I don't really know what we're supposed to do about that, or what we can expect from this team going forward. But it just I don't know. I really don't know where we go from here. Fast breaks, buzzer beaters, and block parties are back, and Underdog is the best place to get in on all the action. Playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like points, rebounds, steals, and more. Get your picks right, and you could win up to 5,000 times your cash. This week on Underdog, I'm looking at the Cavaliers 76ers game, and I'm going to be selecting Tyrese Maxey for higher than 34.5 points and assists, and Evan Mobley for lower than 29.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Download the app today and use promo code BasketballFan to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Once again, that's promo code BasketballFan. Underdog, make picks, win money. So the age-old question, what do the Bucks try to add as this trade deadline comes along? We've had so many conversations about the different kinds of guys that the Bucks can target, whether they are, pretty great scorers out on the perimeter like a Malik Monk, or a defensive minded guy like a Najee Marshall, or maybe a mix of both, a 3-and-D guy like a Royce O'Neal, or a Derrick Jones Jr. somewhat before he got hurt. There are obviously guys out there, and of course like Michael Porter Jr., and you could even throw the Ja Morant stuff in there, even though it's just not really realistic. There are different avenues that the Bucks could go in terms of at least the archetype of guy that they want coming towards the deadline. But what should it be? What should the final pick be? And honestly, I'm kind of torn because in one area, or at least in some respect, I can see the benefit of bringing in, let's say, a Zach LaVine from the Sacramento Kings, another guy that's just an automatic scoring weapon that you can rely upon to just for that, just to, step back and hit some, cool off the dribble threes, and, add that kind of shot variety to the offense where it doesn't always have to rely on Giannis backing down in the post, kicking out, and then swing. Zach LaVine can easily create his own shot, and he could obviously create his own shot, or he would be able to create his own shot better than anybody on the Bucks on the, out on the perimeter. So I can see it from that perspective, but then again, if you have a Zach LaVine, Kevin Porter Jr. backcourt, or a Ryan Rollins, Zach LaVine backcourt, I feel like there's something missing there, or at least that's not the makeup of the backcourt for a real title contender. Like, that it wouldn't be a needle mover. But then again, if you were to just again go in the area of a guy like a Najee Marshall or a Royce O'Neal, it just feels like the Bucks then are lacking that kind of secondary guy for Giannis to rely upon in clutch situations, like how Chris Middleton did for years. You would be lacking that guy, and it would just remain a team effort and a community based thing where you just have to rely on whoever is on fire that night to hit these clutch shots. Of course, Kevin Porter Jr. can fill in for these kinds of moments, but he's not a guy that you 100% trust with the ball in his hands when the game is on the line, like how it was with Chris Middleton. And at least with Zach LaVine, you would get more of a sense of security. And of course, with a Michael Porter Jr. too. I don't know if I mentioned MPJ, but he's also out there as well. But what do the Bucks need more of? Because from this past game, I guess you can say, the defense would have mattered a whole lot, at least, scrambling and rotating out to these guys, and, just getting more of a hand up on these guys. And to some degree, there's not much you can do when guys are just making shots. But I think the Bucks could have affected the quality of shots that the Timberwolves were getting, at least in that first quarter. And when the Bucks saw, oh yeah, they just hit, 6 of their first 7 threes. Maybe we should, get out there a little bit more. Um, but I could also see the fact that the Bucks had so many opportunities to make somewhat of a comeback. There was that run to start the third quarter where they brought it back down to within, I think it was 15 or 14 or 18. And, it was on the backs of 3-point shooting from Bobby Portis. I don't think Ryan Rollins hit a three. Maybe like KPJ hit a three, AJ Green hit a three, Gary Trent Jr. maybe hit a three. And that's what it was. And maybe you could at least get back some semblance of security with scoring the ball in that way too, if you were to get a Zach LaVine. So I am honestly completely torn. There was a couple episodes ago where I said flat out that I want Michael Porter Jr. on this team, that I feel like that is the get, because at least you get another, uber efficient shot maker that has proven to be one of the most elite jump shooters and shot makers in the NBA, not just this year, but percentage wise, last year too, he was doing work for the Nuggets when he was healthy. So but you need that defensive spark out there. The Bucks really should be a team that's in the market for a guy like Herb Jones or a guy like Trey Murphy, let's say. But it's just a matter of the Bucks not having really anything in terms of assets to give back to the Pelicans other than bad contracts and the 2031 unprotected first. And you wouldn't imagine that would be able, or that the Bucks would be able to bring someone of Herb Jones's caliber in for two bad contracts or decent contracts and a highly valued first round pick. They're probably, I wouldn't be surprised if the Pelicans were to get 2 first round picks, let's say, for Herb Jones. But that's like the kind of package you're looking for. Maybe it should be a guy like Keon Ellis, where he's another 3-and-D shooting guard, where he's becoming quickly one of the most elite role players in very, very limited action in the NBA, and a guy that's a really, really hot commodity for the other 29 teams in the NBA, or 28, I should say, other than the Sacramento Kings too. So maybe it's those kinds of guys that can be had if the Bucks put together a good enough package, but it's just fact that they don't have the assets to do so. So their choices are limited to a degree. So it's really kind of the main guys that we've been talking about, both for offense and defense, and I feel like they can't really go anywhere else. But Herb Jones, I feel like that would be the guy that I would go for now that I'm just thinking about it. Like, I kind of just came to that thought now. Herb Jones is that guy for me. But who knows? Who knows what's even going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen when the Milwaukee Bucks take on the San Antonio Spurs and Victor Wembanyama coming up on Thursday? I'm not excited for this one, even though the Thunder, well, it's the Thunder. The Thunder beat the Spurs just tonight, and at least maybe, well, actually no, now that's a negative thing, because now they're going to come into next game firing on all cylinders. They want to get back in the win column. This Spurs team obviously is just so deep. They have guards on guards on guards that can both score in a variety of ways. Well, maybe a little bit less for the De'Aaron Foxes of the world, and the Stephon Castles. But these guys can get to the basket at will, have somewhat of reliable mid-range jumpers, and they have guards that can guard, and wings that can guard, and wings that can shoot, and wings that can do everything. And Victor Wembanyama and Luke Cornett off the bench. This is going to be an extremely tough one, and I really, it's hard to say that there's hope going against still believe they're the second seed in the West even after they lost tonight. But hopefully Giannis can find some way to stifle Victor, and the rest of this Bucks unit can put on. I think if they came out and they put on a massive shooting night, if the Bucks ended up shooting 54% from 3 on 37 attempts, then maybe there's a chance that they can eke this one out. But if they come into this next game cold, like how they were throughout the entirety of this one, I don't really see anything too great happening. But with that being said, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for tuning into another episode of Bucks Latest, presented by the good people over at FanArch. As always, I've been your host, Dean Simon, and before you go, please leave that like, leave that comment down below, and subscribe. Still on that road to 2K subs, so if you want to join along, please consider doing so, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on future Milwaukee Bucks updates. Once again, massive shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Go Bucks.